Good day. So today we are going to be taking on a very difficult question. Even though the presentation is going to be about Tibet and its struggle for independence from China and the way the US was involved with it, we're really talking about a much bigger question. And that is, when is it right, if ever, for the United States to help other countries gain their independence? When is it right for a country like the United States to get involved in the independence of another nation? Okay, so this is a big question I had, and I decided, because I'm really interested in Asia and China and Tibet, to apply it to the war that occurred in Tibet for its independence with the help of the United States, secretly. So since Tibet has got what's the tallest mountain in the world? Mount Everest, that's right. So if you think about it, Tibet is the rooftop of the world. So that's where I got my title, The Secret War on the Rooftop of the World. So, again, the question, when is it, if ever, is it justified for the US to intervene in a foreign conflict? So we studied the Spanish-American War, and the answers to that question, kind of went both ways. Yes, because they were actually helping people in an independence movement, even though once they got their independence, the United States signed military treaties with them that really looked like a really using sort of relationship with Cuba. In World War I, the United States was in a position to actually help end that war and bring back, at the very least, freedom of the seas, and the whole idea that shipping would be able to travel without threat of being torpedoed by another nation. So there are different answers to these questions. So that's why I thought it would be a good way to think about it in terms of the Cold War, which was the CIA's backing of the Tibetan resistance against China during the Cold War, which was like from the 1940s up until the late 1980s, justified. And I got some really cool photos of the Tibetan soldiers being trained. Even more important than that, one thing that I learned is that the people who live in Tibet have a very, very distinct culture all their own, which is completely separate from, a big Chinese culture where everybody is ethnically, I think, Han Chinese from an ethnic standpoint. Communist China really doesn't have an official religion. The Tibetans have a very strong relationship with spirituality and Buddhism, and it's just a very, very different set of cultures. So in addition to being a pretty distinct ethnic group, they also have a very, very different culture, which made me think, yes, in a lot of ways they were already independent. It was just a matter of fighting war to try to get it, and who would be around to help. So starting around the 20th century, 1913 through 1949, Tibet declared itself an independent country and actually was independent from China in almost every way. They had their own trading systems. They had their own constitution. They had their own laws. They operated really separately from China. But then in 1949, when China went completely communist, and it was really clear that the sides on the Cold War were going to be Russia and China versus the United States, there was an effort in China to consolidate, to bring in all of the lands that were close to it and bring them in as territories of China. Tibet was part of that. And China made a huge effort to do this between 1945 and 1976. This is a picture of, he has a lot of different nicknames. He's known as the chairman or, just Chairman Mao. This picture was in hundreds, and still is in hundreds of millions of households in China. Mao is really seen as this icon of communism and of the way that a society should be all the time. This, kind of in contrast to this, is celebrating Tibetan Independence Day, celebrating this whole idea of Tibet being its own separate nation. So in the 1950s, the Tibetan people violently resisted Chinese rule, conducting some successful raids and battles against the Chinese military. There have been a lot of comparisons between the effort for Tibetans to take up arms against China as being very similar to the independence movement, say, in the United States, against a very powerful colonial nation.